Okay, this video is called Dollars and Cents. Is economic pain across New Zealand a necessary wake-up call? So this video has been quite widely viewed and it's from NewsHub, so let's go and take a look.
Accelerator over a very long and extended period in regard to inflating the global economy. Each time we had a pretty big economic accident, the big interest rate lever came out and they waved that magic wand. Some stage you're going to hit that sort of tipping point, and lo and behold, when you throw together an awful lot of demand stimulus from the central banks historically, an awful lot of stimulus, what can only be described as kitchen sink style economics from both central banks and governments in response to COVID.
But just quickly, how much stock do you put in National's claim that a lot of this is being driven by government spending?
Yeah, so the injection of a lot of money into the economy from the different governments, it's not just New Zealand government, it's happening with a lot of governments around the world during the pandemic times, is directly responsible of inflation, for example. Like, it's just, it hyperinflates the prices of things without, it's just like you're magically creating money and giving money to people for them to spend, which is good for the short term. But of course, inflation will be a result of that. Like, is literally just what is going to happen. And now, many reserve banks around the world are trying to fix this particular problem by raising interest rates. And this is just, it's all a natural response of, all the things that happened beforehand.
Short answer, yes, the government has contributed. The $60 billion COVID relief package poured an awful lot of money on an inflationary bonfire. Things such as lifting the minimum wage, while admirable, if you're not seeing productivity growth on the other side, it's going to add to unit labour costs, it adds to costs, it adds to that additional 50 cents you end up paying for your cup of coffee.
Yeah, so the minimum wage thing is definitely a very hotly debated topic. Like, I am on the side that don't actually believe that simply raising minimum wage would actually solve the living cost problems, simply because it's quite easy for businesses to pass down any sort of increases in prices onto the consumer, and they can pass it down quicker than any government can actually respond. So government can increase minimum wage, but they're not going to do it like every 3 months or so. Whereas a business can easily increase the price, pretty much whenever they want. They can increase this next month, they can increase this next week. They can increase it, they could keep on increasing it until someone stops buying. But until then, they can just keep on increasing the price and keep on passing down the price to consumers. And honestly, as consumers, depending on the monopoly of, how essential the business is, there may be not a ton that you can actually do about it.
What is it going to take to get us out of this? What do the government got to do? What have reserve banks got to do?
Some pretty bold and bigger picture thinking. Now the Reserve Bank is doing the right job here in regard to, they overcooked things. Their kitchen sink style economics, they've over-egged the omelette, so now they've got to turn things down on the other side, and it's going to hurt. There's a whole lot of first-time buyers that have purchased properties in the last 12 months that are in a fair bit of pain at the moment, but that's what happens when you need to cut back on demand. You need to usher in some economic pain across New Zealand.
So that's one of the things that could be concerning in the next couple of years. So a lot of first-time home buyers got into the housing market due to the low mortgage rates. So as the rates keep on increasing in an effort to slow down inflation, some of them could potentially not be able to afford the mortgage payments, or they have to severely scale back their current living substantially, or just have a completely different budget system in order to be able to still afford the home that they purchase when the interest rates are low. Which also means that it's entirely possible that some of them simply won't be able to pay their mortgages, and they may potentially lose their house that they have bought from when the interest rates are low. So like these factors means that there is a potential. There's definite potential for the house prices to go even lower. Like if some of these houses are not being paid and are forced to be collected by the banks and maybe up for reselling, maybe. But when they're up for reselling, like would they get as much as the price that they have for when interest rates were low? Like most likely not. So it's just a wait and see game to see what happens.
If you ever look at non-COVID related expenditure in the coming 12 months, is going to be up 13.8% compared to 2022. Now that is an absolutely eye-watering number considering the economic environment we are sitting in. And they're saying the 2023, the 2024, 2025 budgets are going to be pretty lean affairs. Well, I hope they are lean affairs, because if they're not, the Reserve Bank's going to be lifting interest rates on the other side. They're overlooking economics 101. Yeah, we've got a mismatch here between demand and supply. And the thing in the middle is called inflation. Now, we have to get the bottom line up as the top line comes down. And I know which one is the more economically friendly one for society. Yeah, so pretty simple message here. That's focus, whether it be government, but businesses need to be doing a lot of heavy lifting here as well. They need to be focusing on being more productive, more dynamic. They can't just point the finger at the government in regard to expecting the government to do all the heavy lifting. We're all in this sort of stuff together.
Oh, I think it's kind of easy to say that the businesses need to do some more lifting as well. But the problem is, as people have less, disposable income to spend, the amount that people would spend on the businesses would also decrease. So when the economy slows down, everything slows down. So yeah, while you say businesses should probably be doing more, but it's not as easy as just that. The businesses are suffering as well. The people have less to spend. The businesses have less demand for their services and goods, and that's how you get a recession.
What does next year look like for small businesses and for Kiwis' back pockets?
Yeah, to get inflationary thief back in jail, you do need to have some economic pain. Yeah, you do need to see firms' margins start to contract. You need to see people stop spending. Asset prices tend to come down on the other side, and we are going through that economic adjustment. But some of this is a bit of, there's an optimistic view here on the other side. Because
so what I'm referring to with the businesses, I'm not talking about small businesses. Small businesses definitely suffering. Like, I think what he meant was actually for the bigger businesses to actually shoulder some of the costs themselves, which I think what he meant are like, the utility providers, the power companies, the banks, like the major banks, the big banks that are still raking in money, even though as the economy is slowing down, like the building company that just passes on costs to the people that are building the new sites, the petrol companies that could easily just pass on costs down to the consumers, because people need to get around, people need to drive. Public transport in most places in New Zealand are pretty terrible. Some places a little better, some places a lot worse than others. But I think he's actually referring to these companies that should lower their margins. But the thing is, would they? Like, most of these companies, like, for example, petrol companies, supermarkets, they pretty much have a semi-monopoly. Like, they pretty much, collude with each other to fix prices. Would they ever feel the need to have lower margins? Probably not, unless the government specifically does something about them.
Because we've got to look back and think about, things became fundamentally out of whack for a long time in regard to central banks, using their interest rate levers far too much. And it was a big contributor to income inequality, or in fact, wealth inequality, because it just turbocharged asset prices. There's some basic things that are going to take place going forward. Is that we're going to get reintroduced to Mr. and Mrs. C. Ash. Businesses that actually make real money, as opposed to talking about capital gains and the prospect of exponential growth. Now the rubber tends to hit the road. You're going to see the good businesses are going to do well over the next 2 to 3 years. Why? Because they're just good businesses. Your investors now need to take real risk to make real money.
So there is. Yeah, so So this is pretty similar to what happens in every recession, really. Like around the 2000s dot-com bubble, the 2008 recessions. A lot of the companies that are actually good, solid companies, they end up surviving those recessions and becoming even better and growing more. While any sort of recession environment tends to shake out all the weaker, just not profitable companies. So again, it may, like in the grand scheme of things, it may not be a bad thing. Again, this is something that we just have to wait and see. But again, in the grand scheme of things, usually the good companies tend to survive any sort of these economic downturns and end up on top.
There's a case for optimism here. It's not all doom and gloom.
When you go through tougher economic times, ironically, there tends to be a lot more appetite for a bit of change. And what we're doing on a whole lot of areas is we've sort of been kicking the can down the road in areas such as education. Does it look really right that we now spend more on New Zealand superannuation than what we do in terms of operational spend on education? But probably the most important thing that the government...
Yeah, I would say it's definitely not. Education is incredibly important, incredibly important. You just can't, not emphasize how important education is. Education brings up the standard of everything, the country standards, the living standards, everything. Education is incredibly important.
Could shift their focus to is away from demand stimulus, fiscal policy. Things such as subsidising fuel. And let's get into the ins and outs of the New Zealand economy, which is supply side capacity. How do we make the New Zealand economy able to grow faster, consistently year after year?
Cameron Baggery there.
I think he raises good questions, but he's not being particularly specific with any suggestions. I'm not even looking for answers. For example, I don't think he even answered the question that is posed in the video. Is economic pain across New Zealand a necessary wake-up call? Did he actually answer that particular question at any point? I'm not really sure of that. So I think while he raises good points, some good concerns, but there's no suggestions really, apart from businesses should improve their service. I mean, I don't think that really needs to be said because that's just almost a given. So I don't know. Let me know what you think. Does New Zealand need a necessary wake-up call? All right, see you guys.